Your voice is really cutting. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, is that better? Can you hear me better now?
Yes, sounds better. Yes.
Okay, sorry. So I'm not going to hide Sanskrit word because it's true that not just a language, it's an entire philosophy and it's an entire way of understanding the universe, because each word has so many different meanings that all bridge in a certain worldview, which is just not there in the Romance languages or the Slavic languages or many of the others on the planet. The idea of concepts that have an absolute philosophical base is somewhat unique to Sanskrit. And so I can't find one word that will describe. So what I do is just use the Sanskrit word. So the laboratory of the individual self knows that Ayurveda knows that this is Ihara, which is entire science, application, and logistics of bringing things into your body. So you can say that that's food, but if you're a Bengali like I am, a Bengali knows that the word kawa, or you can say kha, but it's a Bengali word, that is not only about food. So we say khabar khai, so that's food. Jal khai, so that's water. Cigarette. Every time it gets cut off, right? I think, I don't know what's up with that. Yeah, maybe you want to drop second connection with my name. I don't know. But my connection does say it's kind of unstable, so I don't know what to do. I'm trying to.
Yeah, just keep your audio on. Only, yeah, keep your video off, and let's try that. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Okay. Sorry this. So what I was saying is that could you hear what I said about the kawa? I think so. So
not
kawa,
exactly right. Yeah, you can repeat it. Yes, thanks.
So kawa is a Bengali verb that's very close to the idea of ahara, which is taking things in. So we say khabar kawa, which is food. We say jal kawa, which is water. We say cigarette kawa, which is obviously not food, it's a cigarette. We say prem kawa, so that's love. We say bokuni kawa, which is getting scolded. So the idea of taking anything into your being is kawa, and that corresponds with the Sanskrit science or the Sanskrit word of ahara. Vihara is anything that is related to lifestyle. So it includes food, but it's really about the choices that we make around sleep and exercise and our routines of the day according to the day-night cycle as well as the seasonal cycle. And then we have Oshadham, which are all of the things that we take in medicinally. Now that can mean food. So certain foods are medicinal. We'll talk a little bit about that. But there are things which are specific to diseases. And Ayurveda is not just a preventive, it is actually an interventive science. It is one of the best sciences for emergency medicine and for very severe diseases. But it depends on 4 pillars. And the one pillar is having the correct medicine available. The second is to have a knowledgeable physician. So I set out on my quest to find these wise physicians that are very good and experienced at treating almost any disease. And I have been both amazed and profoundly changed by the toolbox that really good physicians use, which the mediocre physicians, which are both in allopathy and homeopathy and Ayurveda and every medical science, mediocre physicians don't know about, but the really good physicians, I really set out to learn more about Ayurveda from that point of view. What is the potential and what are the possibilities? So we're going to talk about that. And because Professor Jain talked with me about making it current to the COVID situation, I'm going to talk a little bit about the boosting of the immune system. But I'm going to really talk about the idea of a transformation of an individual as proof of effectiveness. Because you might say, well, that's just the placebo effect. Ayurveda says, I don't care what it is. If you're really sick, a patient hardly cares whether or not there's evidence-based, placebo-controlled, randomized, double-blinded trials that support it. They just know that they had a severe disease like cancer or cardiovascular disease or thyroid or arthritis or anything that gives them pain, and they just want to feel better. So science chips away at what is false and sets up hypotheses hypotheses and does a lot of evidence-based studies around testing and all those words that I used before about controlling things so there's no bias. Ayurveda says, what is bias? We all live in our bodies with our souls. Let's just look at patterns of actions that we can observe as true and draw our science according to those laws. And so they don't look at correlating evidence-based trials. They look at correlating what has been seen in the world around us. So we're going to talk about it. And I think in 40 minutes, we won't get to all of these discussions, but we can certainly talk about some of these as why scientists don't look at Ayurveda more fully and how they could if they wanted to. Let's see, I think I have to move this over now. Yeah, so I'm going to give you 10 examples, and we're going to work through those examples as a way of understanding some of the concepts. So number one is understanding oil and skin. In the Western world, oil is bad. We spend a lot of time with oils and fats and lipids as very bad. They're the cause of us being obese, and they're behind our coronary artery disease, and they're behind our various lipid problems, and not just obesity and overweight, but also all the things that are risk factors from that, like diabetes or like bone problems. Ayurveda understands it very differently. It says if you don't have a balance of oil in your body, and if you don't understand your skin, then you're going to get sick. So the power of hair oil. So many Indians use hair oil, whether it's amla oil or coconut oil or mustard oil or some kind of Bringaraj oil. Most Indians who are traditional, that grew up in a traditional Indian family, know about the power of oil and head massage. And there's a whole custom around kids sitting down on the floor between the knees of the parents, and the parents sitting up on a stool or a chair and rubbing the head and the hair massage and the head, the scalp massage, and then combing the hair and letting oil sit in it, doing it either every day or once a week. And if needed, creating this pool of pool of oil on the head, which is called Shiro head, Basti, which is like a collection. Well, modern medicine used to think that this was absolutely ridiculous. And in fact, many Indians who teach that they're very modern and very with the system, which is usually the British biomedical system, used to say this is ridiculous because the blood supply of the brain is very different on the scalp and the superficial levels than it is inside the brain. So they used to taunt me when I would say, well, we put oil on the head because it seeps in through the skin and goes into the brain. And they would say, ha, 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 you just don't know. Well, sure enough, a few years ago, this is a July 2019 paper in a great journal, and it shows that it's a radiology journal, actually radiology medicine. It says that there are these veins called emissary veins that connect the extracranial, means outside the brain skull, the vein system, with the inside the brain skull sinuses, which are big, large pockets of blood. And as they connect the outside to the inside, they drain from the scalp through the skull into the larger veins and into the inside where the brain is. So you can see here that this is the scalp level, and they put some radioactive compound here inside the oil, and then they put it inside, and they saw that it actually goes into the very deepest levels of the brain. This is the MRI scan of the brain. And then here's where the sinuses come together. So this shows that there are many, many different types of brain connections with the skull. So somehow Ayurveda knew this, and so they take these oils and they pour them down, and actually they use them to provide herbs into the body. So isn't that interesting that Ayurveda already knew this? The second example is the immune system. So we talk about ojas, and in the Shastras, this is from the Charaka Samhita, which is, this is one of the translations. In the first section of sutras, which is called the Sutrasthana, chapter 17, they say that the decline of this ultimate resilience and vitality, which is known as ojas, begins with, now the decline begins with you living in fear, living in constant weakness, that poor memory, that hesitation, that lack of fortification that you have not only with food, but with happiness. When you worry so much, when you have pain all the time coming through your sense organs, when you notice in the mirror that you've lost your complexion, when you notice in your mind that you have a lack of cheer and some hopelessness, when you notice that your skin starts to become rough around your elbows, around your feet, when you start to become emaciated, this is the trend, this is the beginning of the decline. And if you translate that into cancer, they talk about the decline of the immune system as well. And Ayurveda says that if you want to keep your body healthy, you must focus on your ojas and understanding that this is the basis of you keeping good health. Now, I've written a bunch of columns on COVID in this paper called the South Asian Times.info. You can go there if you want to read any of these. This is about the concept of juta and how in India, we have a certain hygiene level that I'm calling it hygiene, but it's so much more. It's about the way we touch people and don't touch people. And it is a very, very powerful signal, which actually is not just a part of the Juta or Uchishta culture. There are different words for this in different languages. So in Marathi, it's called Ushta or Ushta. I don't know exactly how it's pronounced, but in Bangla, it's called Eto. And the idea that you should not drink out of someone else's glass, you should not take the spoon or the fork from your own mouth and take food from another person's plate. The fact that you should not wear other people's clothing or use other people's toothbrushes or soap or pillowcases. These kind of things are very commonly done in the West, in Europe and in America, but they're absolutely forbidden in any traditional Indian Bharatiya household. And when I say Bharatiya, I mean before the 1400s. So those people that are descendants of the Indians from those ancient times knew about these concepts. And so the idea of using yoga, meditation, and having a strong understanding the is what I touched upon because it relates right into the immune system and this idea of vitality. And as we look into it, we can see that this principle of resilience, of optimal strength, and yad kshamatva, which is the ability to resist diseases, comes from something in the body that we can call ojas, but it can also relate to what you have done as oka satmya, means what you're used to eating, living, and how you have lived your life. So if your mother fed you, you have a higher ojas. If you have if you have food, the best superior quality foods, you will have immunity. And so we take that into greater understanding of immune function than most of modern medicine is currently doing. And so when you see the data right now about COVID, earlier, strange and weird, unpredictable. Indians don't have the COVID surge that we would expect in a country that is so populated, and obviously they have something, and they live poor houses, and they very dirty people, and so that's why they have such high immunity. Well, our of Indians make a livelihood from farm, so they are close to the land. I'm sorry about that. I'll share my screen again. Can you hear me? Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Thank you. So what I was saying is that the fun thing to understand is that all of this, where they say, oh, Indians are just dirty, or they don't have, they have better immunity. And they say it in a very derogatory way, which is, of course, the way we've always seen the Westerners refer to Indian things. I mean, Indians are kind of an interesting breed, but yet it's a very pejorative thing. And that's been my experience traveling through, dozens of countries and living a long educated in the US. So this idea that okasatmia, that our cells are more resilient, hasn't been analyzed by most people. But as a person that's been studying Ayurveda and also studying metals, if you see here, this is metal ions. These metal ions form a kind of belt through the middle of the DNA, what we call the double helix. And as it passes just through here and weaves its way through, these metals are very, very important for the integrity of DNA, which prevent mutagenesis that causes cancer, which prevent expressions of genes that cause all kinds of diseases. And those metals are usually copper, zinc, and some of the trace metals. And people in the modern medical world have not yet even looked into this. But Ayurveda has already talked about the importance of metals in a field called Rasa Shastra, which many of you may have heard of. So we'll just leave that as an example and go to the next one, and then we can have some discussion at the end. Ayurveda also talks about understanding agriya. I mentioned this word before, agriya foods, and one of them is ghee, but it must be cultured ghee and not these kind of generic terms which are from the West, which do not understand what ghee is. Ghee must be made cultured from milk into yogurt. The yogurt must then be churned to bring out the butter, or the makhan, as we say. And the makhan then must be heated to make ghee. That cultured ghee is the medicinal one. And that is the one that I use to help people with coronary artery disease to reverse their heart disease. I use it to help people with diabetes to reverse their diabetes. Why would giving ghee help reverse diabetes? This is a long medical discussion we can have. However, as someone who has been testing this for the last 20 years, and as someone who uses cultured ghee, I can tell you that those bacteria that are made when milk comes into yogurt are a very, very important part of living. And anyone that lives in rural Maharashtra knows the importance of having homemade yogurt versus having, this packet bought yogurt or store bought yogurt. So there's a very big power to understanding ghee. Other agriya foods include old or aged rice, which is 180 days aged, which has not been polished or refined, and which is locally grown with the philosophy that the air you breathe is the air that rice breathes. And the water that you drink is the same water that rice grows from. And the land that you walk on is the same land it walks on. So they say that you should have local rice. And it's better than having Kohinoor, Tilda, or long basmati rice, which are very expensive and are grown in some precious foothills of some area, but are processed, are certainly hulled, and the paddy is chemically reduced out from the seed, which is the rice. And those polished rices have a very different effect on the human body. So the agriya food is local rice. We already talked about raw milk. We talked about cultured ghee. Moong dal is another one. And the sabji, which is the vegetable which is in season in your local area, is the right vegetable for you. Of the fruits, grapes are the best. Seeded dark red grapes or the yellow grapes are the best. Now, if you can limit your diet to center around these foods, you will grow your strength back. That is what Ayurveda says. And I have experienced people who actually listen to my recommendations, and I watch how their bodies change. So the agriya foods, if you're interested, you can write to me. I think I have given my email address here. This is my main email address, and then these are my two websites. Dietary is the name of my school where I run classes of Ayurveda. We're doing a new introduction to Ayurveda from this spring, and then this is for my practice. So if you want to write to me, I'll send you more information about the agriya foods. So that's about key. So I'm going to just stop after these 5 examples and give you a few basic concepts. And now that we are halfway through, and some of you are thinking, great, keep going. And some of you might be thinking, what is Ayurveda? Wait, you haven't explained some basics. So let's go through a few slides of basics. Ayurvedic modalities have a goal of detoxifying, purifying, and rebalancing the elements in your body to give you a sense of rejuvenation. Because when things are working in harmony, your body will get stronger. You won't be absent-minded. You won't feel like your muscles are coming away from your bones. You won't feel dry cracks under your heels. You won't have any gas or bloating or diarrhea or constipation or acid reflux or any kind of problems in your gut. Your gut will be unperceivable because there's no pain in it. And so Ayurveda has all these modalities to help. The top are things that are known to medicine. These are called CAM, or alternative medicine therapies. These third block are the ones unique to Ayurveda. And these fourth ones are more spiritual and enter into the subtle realms, but they are very much part of Ayurveda. And so we know about diet and lifestyle changes and exercise, and we know a little bit about intermittent fasting. Now it's come into the horizon of modern medicine and allopathic care and you could say natural medicine or naturopathy. In the second part, we all know about pranayama and yoga and meditation, and they say all of these are alternate medicine, aromatherapy, massage, and using food as medicine, using sound therapy. These are all alternative or complementary or integrative medicine. Ayurveda talks specifically about marma points, which were then taken by the Shaolin monasteries, and the Buddhists went up toward Kashmir and across the Himalayas into Japan, China, Korea, where it got adopted as acupuncture points. And there are many books that discuss how the Chinese received their basics of their medical system from the Indian knowledge. And so, I mean, it's such a well-known thing, and yet people still say, oh, the Yellow Emperor's Book of Medicine is older than Ayurveda, because everything the British did was to take away the dates of reality of what happened in India and put everything at a very late date, including these Aryan invasion theories and other theories that would allow the British and the Europeans to kind of co-opt everything that was Indian. Anyway, that's more of a political discussion. What we know is that marma points are older than acupuncture points, and yet they both come to the same human reality, that at the confluence of several different types of tissues like blood vessels and nerves and ligaments and bone, we have these trigger points that are marma. We also have tonics that are specific to building up certain tissues. So if you have certain foods or certain medicinal herbs, you can tone up or repair certain tissues. So right now I have a patient with a torn rotator cuff, and I'm working with her through medicinal herbs to repair her tear so she doesn't have to get surgery. And I've done this with dozens of patients where they were told by the orthopedist that they had to have surgery, but just by using the right Ayurvedic foods, yoga, and medicinal herbs, they were able to repair. And it's very exciting for me to watch it, to see my patients come back from bad injuries that they thought would be permanent, especially when doctors say you'll never walk normally again, and then to watch them repair and their body to repair. So it's pretty amazing. The process that kind of unites this is called panchakarma, which many of you may have heard of here, panchakarma, oops. And it's a oil-based cleansing that goes in, and it's not as easy as just putting oil in your body. It's like taking a raw mango that has some juice in it and squeezing it out. How do you do it? Well, you ripen it. And then when it ripens, you just touch the mango and the mango juice comes out. But the raw mango can't. So a sick body is like a raw mango, and we need to ripen that disease to get it out of the body many times. So there are herb formulas. There's also chikitsa that includes what we call astrology, but it's deeper than astrology. It's like an astrological astronomy. We also use mantra, the power of sound, and we use gemstones. And these are all considered occult sciences by people who just don't know. In order to translate Ayurveda, you have to understand many concepts and disciplines. And this is one of the reasons why people are not good at Ayurveda from the modern disciplines, because they train in one area and they go deep into that area, and you'll see that chemists don't speak with physicists. So they cannot understand many of the concepts because they're stuck in their own world. Now we have material science. Material science and engineering will go at the place where physics meets chemistry. But geology is separate from chemistry, and agriculture is separate from physics, and botany is separate from geology, and culinary sciences is separate from all of these. So how will these people all talk to each other? A good Vaidya knows about all of these things. And if you say it's impossible, I will tell you, I've met many of them. They have no desire to compete in mainstream academia, because most mainstream academic people will never accept people like them, because all of us who learn all these different sciences are considered to be weird. And so, silos keep grain separate. So in most schools, the disciplines are kept separate. Certain colleges were very forward thinking, and I was looking at the curriculum of Flame, and it looks like the attitude is very interdisciplinary. Harvard has a curriculum like that now that's more interdisciplinary. The schools that think more interdisciplinary allow for the reality that real intellectuals will start studying different disciplines to bring new frontiers together, and that's what Ayurveda does. So let's look at some more examples, and then I will finish up and take some questions. So the entire science of Ahara, which I mentioned before, so if you look at the heat, internal energy and heat, what we do in the body of any human is we see where their Agni is. The Agni comes from the food down, it triggers the Agni here when you're tasting, comes down the esophagus into the stomach and sits up here. This is called the cardia. It's right under the heart. The heart would be right around here behind it. And there's a diaphragm that kind of goes right along here as well. So the food sits here, and then the gravity pulls it downwards. And from here onward, there is a cauldron of digestive enzymes sitting in fluid, which are called the digestive fire. We think of fire as in air, so we think of flames. But those chemical reactions in water are what we call the digestive fire, whose Sanskrit name is Jataragni, and it goes all the way through this area until all this digestion happens. So the idea of understanding Ahara is so important in Ayurveda. They have all these different concepts of different types of kapas, different types of vas, and different types of pittas. The main of this Jataragni is Pachaka Pitta, and it happens in the lower part of the stomach and the early part of the intestines. And so for any basic biology major, they understand that this is gut physiology according to modern medicine. But Ayurveda says, you know what, you've got it a little bit wrong because you're going by anatomy when you cut up a cadaver. How about looking at a human body that's living and seeing how the function is? So when you look at the living function, these actually make more sense and point much more to some of the concepts that we're going to look at here. So the idea of taste being not just something on the tongue, but throughout the body, and signaling the body through this very well worked out neuroscience circuit that goes to the brain. And what this does is it actually activates taste and digestion based on the flavors that you have. So what you experience from childhood, from your Annaprashan, which is one of the 16 rituals you should have in your life. So the Sola Shastra, what do we call it? I'll just say the 16, what should we call it? Rituals.
Sola Sanskar.
Yeah. How will you translate Sola Sanskar in English? The 16
rites of passages. Rites of passage.
Rites of passage, or rituals, or life rituals, or life instructions that you should have. So when you go through those, the Annaprashan, which happens at 6 months, starts you on a journey toward tasting. And if you notice, by about 6 years, you've developed what you like, depending on what your parents were wise enough to feed you. At that point, you lose your baby teeth and you get your adult teeth. And the entire idea of how this develops and what this does for you develops your satmya, what you prefer. So if you were a child and you grew up in Japan, but you're of Indian origin, but your dad was in Japan, let's say, and you grew up eating sushi, which is fish and rice, and miso soup, which is soy and seaweeds, you will have that as your satmya. Your rasa, your taste will develop that. And by the time you come back to India, let's say at the age of 7 or 8, you can eat rice and dal and all the things your parents ate, but there's a part of you that when you get sick or when you get depressed, you will want sushi. You will have a craving for that fish. You will have a craving for those seaweeds. And this happens. We see immigrant children go to a new land and they want the new foods, and they don't get the tripti, they don't get the fulfillment from those other foods. The science of why this is actually being worked out now by the neurosciences, but those of us who have had guru shishya, we actually learn the science behind this before we don't have to wait until we get modern science to teach us. It's very exciting to see how the rasa of taste is so important, because our nanis, our grandparents, taught us about this. There is a taste in all different foods. And these are sorry, this slide looks so bad. I actually made PDF, so I think it downgraded the crispness of the slide. The chemical substances are all here. This is according to modern chemistry. These are the different metals and how we can have all 6 tastes. So they say, for example, that if you want to develop your taste and you want to eat clean, you should eat on full, which is also known as bronze or known as kansha. Kansha is copper and tin together. These are the superior layman's metals that you should eat on. If you're a little bit more wealthy, you should eat on silver. And certainly every Indian should own a silver cup made of, as high a silver as you can afford. You can't really go much more than 92.5%, because then the silver becomes too pliable. But you should have a silver cup. And if you can really afford it and you're a Raja, or you're like one of these Maratha kings, descendants, you have cups of gold, you have spoons of gold, you have nuggets of gold that you put in your water and you boil your water. These all provide metals into the body. And Ayurveda talks about the importance of that. Oops, sorry. So if we go into this one, these are some of the books from modern medicine would call them ancient times, because it's 11th, 12th, 13th century, but they're actually pretty recent, because the Charaka Samhita is about 2000 years older than this by conservative estimates. But these books are where you learn about ahara and how to make good recipes. If you study, then you'll see, for example, from Ashtanga Hridayam, which is a very simple book for basic learning, they go through the different kinds of foods. And if you learn these, you can actually, every single chapter, every single shloka talks about the medicinal use and which diseases each of these will treat. So it's fun to go through these. I've just gone through them shloka by shloka during the COVID time to tell people what to eat and what not to eat, in addition to that list that I had given you earlier. I also went through these different aspects of food from the different textbooks that talk about how in every meal you should have something you eat, something you drink, something that's lickable, and something that's chewable. Otherwise, your meal is not complete. So if you think about the achar, the mango pickle or the lime pickle, that's something you lick. You literally pick up a little bit with your finger and you put it on your tongue. You have something that you chew. Nobody's having smoothies for a meal in the traditional culture. You have something you drink. It can be your takra, your buttermilk, or it can be a little bit of some other kind of fluid something, maybe a very watery dal, or it can be the water, but it should be something that you drink. All of these must be there. So these principles actually advocate that this is good for our entire body. It's good for our entire subsistence and digestion. Ayurveda also talks about Kala Bhojan. This should have a line over it. Kala Bhojan is the time of when to eat, like, oh, you should 9 o'clock, you should have your lunch at 1:30 or 2 o'clock. But it's also about what to eat, when to eat, with whom to eat, where to sit and where not to sit, why to eat a certain way and how to eat, and what percentages of what kind of food to eat. And it's very particular and very detailed in what it tells you. And yet, it tells you in broad strokes so that you don't do the same thing in Pune as you would do in Kolkata. It talks about fasting, which is there in every religion, every culture. It talks about fasting certainly on Ekadasi, but on other days as well, like Amavasya or Purnima. And there are actually reasons behind it, which I'm just going to flip to very quickly after a few slides. There was a conference that talked about the bad things in wheat. And we know that there are 7 deadly white foods, of which wheat flour is one. And when I say flour, I mean wheat flour, not any other kind of flour. But the processing of all of these 7 is which makes them terrible. So I go list by one, and I talk with my students and my patients about why they're bad and what you can do to have good stuff. And Ayurveda tells us processing of salt makes it poisonous. Processing of this white sugar is terrible. What should you have? Have jaggery, have maple syrup in the West, have liquid jaggery in the East, but it should be natural liquid jaggery and not this stuff that comes in bottles. Have sugar cane. In the March, April months of the heat, you should definitely go and get a sugar cane. Don't have someone mechanically squeeze it. Take it and chew it the way you used to when you were a child in the farm. Chewing releases the good stuff from the sugar cane and actually heals the liver. Actually, my boyfriend had hepatitis and he was treated by a modern hospital and he wasn't getting better. And his grandma called him and said, "Come home, beta, puta, ghar aa jao." And he went to the farm and she gave him sugar cane. He said, "Could you squeeze it for me?" She said, "No, you have to chew it with your teeth." And as he chewed it, he took 3 of these every day. And within 3 days, he had been cured from his hepatitis. He was no longer felt better. And he asked his grandma, and she said, "No, if you chew on it, if you chew on the sugar cane, it has a very different effect than if you squeeze it." And we know this to be true. We know that this is from ancient Ayurveda. They have told us this. Okay, so we're going to skip through some of these. I will say that I've written about these in detail. If you go to this website, it's for a newspaper. So I've been writing a series on COVID and Ayurveda for the last, since March last year, so about 45 weeks. And I guess more now, 50 weeks almost. And I have talked about all different themes. So stoking the fire of the gut and how to do it, I talk about in detail. And I really talk about how Ayurveda says it cleans out the lungs. And I have found that definitely to be true in all the COVID patients that we have treated. So next is to understand lifestyle. I've talked a lot about that already. And to understand that skin is very much eating your whatever you put on it. So if you put lotion, would I eat this lotion? Okay, if I would eat it, then I can not eat the lotion skin or the moisturizer or the oil, the body oil, the mineral oil. We would never eat it. Ayurveda says, you know, from transdermal approaches to modern medicine that we take in everything that we put on our skin. So you should only put edible things on your skin. And that is why in India, traditionally, we used mustard oil, coconut oil, sesame oil, we used ghee, and we didn't use any of these refined oils, and we certainly didn't use things that were not edible. Because there is this new organ called the interstitium that they just discovered in modern medicine about 5 years ago. And they showed that actually, if you put things on the skin, there's a highway that takes it across. Why? Because they always used microscopically prepared slides. So, sorry, prepared for the microbe. And so they were using preparations that weren't true to live physiology. Ayurveda always saw what was happening live on living tissue. So these tissues had not collapsed into a paper thin slice, they were still like this, where there's a lot of fluid and stuff moving through. And what they found is these oils are very good. So this Mahanarayan oil is one of the best oils for muscle pain, for people with arthritis. We put it on the knees, we put it on the skin. I use this for everyone that's had paralysis, stroke, or muscle weakness. And it really brings back the nerve growth. And the fact that this is true has been shown in probably millions of patients, but it is completely misunderstood or not even understood in modern medicine. Okay. I also talk about Dinacharya, which is the day-night cycle, and the importance of the lunar cycle. And we talk about the importance of the moon's undulations on your physiology. We talk about the clock genes that got a Nobel Prize for these 3 people a few years ago. We talk about these molecular mechanisms that control the circadian rhythm. But rather than talking biochemistry, Ayurveda talks more through waves of what happens and how you see them in biology and in nature. And certainly you see the movement of things in the natural world as natural phenomena. These are called zit-givers, and some of them are the light, which we obviously see for day-night cycles, but also the temperature and what some of the other things in our environment do. If we artificially create them, they're also zit-givers, but they are very, very powerful regulators of the genes in our body and how they produce proteins and various hormones and enzymes and keep us in balance. People that have thyroid problems, I have had such great results if I just get them to have a good dinacharya. And if they do that, their thyroid problems go away. So the fact that there are molecular clocks and there are daily rhythms that are kind of timing our body and timing all of the processes of our body are very much real. If you want to read more about it, I've written again in that column that I do in the weekly column, and it talks about this whole day's cycle and the things that happen and how you can be aware of it. So the last few slides, I'll just say that if you want to understand Dinacharya, these are just some of the 42 things that you should do during the day. Many people say, oh my gosh, 42 things, that's too much. I'm so busy every day. Just putting your clothes on, from being naked to being fully dressed, you probably do 35 different things and you don't think about it because it's in second nature. Ayurveda says, make your dinacharya second nature, and you will be able to do all of these things every day, and they will become so automatized for you that you won't think of them as painful. And they include, getting up early and immediately getting your body to empty. It's starting the cleansing process, washing your hands, cleaning out your eyes with water, then your nose and your mouth, washing your face. All of these things, one by one, take you through a dinacharya. If you do this, your body's clock genes that we talked about here are going to reset themselves and you'll be a well-tuned factory. There are slightly different prescriptions for the different deshas that you live on, depending on whether you live in very dry eastern Maharashtra or southern Maharashtra versus right in Bombay where it's more moist, or in Pune. Depends if you're in highlands or if you're in the very dry area, you'll have slightly different routines. And for COVID, many of the things around food and lifestyle, things you can eat is fumigation in the morning, in the evening. We used to call it killing mosquitoes, but it's actually not just for mosquitoes. It's for all living small microbes and insects and dust mites and viruses. And so doing dupana, which is burning crocodile or in a earthen planter, you go around the house and you've got either gugulu or you've got coconut. Apologies for that, I got cut off. Shall I continue?
Sure, yes, please.
I'm just almost done. So using these things for dupana is very important. And not only does it keep us, it also cleanses our house and it cleanses our ability to breathe. And there are a series of papers that talk about this. And obviously this is relevant to corona. And in the Ayurvedic hospitals, what we do around a few and in all of the rooms. So to end, I'll say that Ayurveda is not just these herbs. Some people say, well, I use tulsi, so I'm doing Ayurveda, or I use haldi in my food, so I'm doing Ayurveda. No, actually, you're not. Unless you understand the philosophy of balancing the doshas, being in tune with the environment, and learning how to build up your tissues, your dhatus, as they're called, and your ojas, you are not actually doing Ayurveda. Yes, the consequence of using these herbs will be that you will improve your body, but you're not doing it in line with Ayurveda. You're doing it just because you heard something. Ayurveda says you must pay attention to these concepts of dosha, dhatu, and shrotas. And certainly, if you learn Ayurveda in some depth, you start learning about these things. Some of the medicines here, I've put one that was called immuno-free, and it was made for COVID. I think there was another one, picture of it here as well. And I think yesterday Baba Ramdev released his Coronil, and there's a bunch of others out there. Most of them are refurnishing minerals to your body. Why? Because we know that in the lungs, in the human lung, there's a definite need for copper and zinc. For here, you can see this copper and zinc in order to make the enzymes of the lungs work well. And so if you can do that, you're going to find that you have some bhasmas going into your body, and you're going to find that it absolutely disables all of the lung viruses, which is what we want. The other thing you want to use is guduchi, which is not a metal in case you're afraid of metals. And it is a vine that grows usually around the peepal tree or the neem tree or supari trees. And you can find in a variety of different preparations, and they all have guduchi, which is called Tinospora cordifolia, which has had a lot of tests done to show that it boosts up the immune system without toxically creating a cytokine storm. Oops, sorry about this. And so here we are at the end. I will be happy to take some questions and just say to you that if you really want to understand Ayurveda, don't go to randomized control trials, go to case reports where you see the beauty of what has been done with Ayurveda. I'm going to skip over these slides. These are repeat slides, and just say that please have an open mind to Ayurveda because it really does work. There are 8 legal medical systems in India, all of these, but all of them are modern, by the way, but we only think of biomedical science or allopathy as the modern, and Ayurveda only gets relegated as the last option, which is why Ayurveda can't work for people, because they're already so sick, they just don't have a chance to make it happen. And the translation of Sanskrit is an ongoing problem, but we can talk about that in the question and answer series. This is how I treat people. This is an overview of a case study. I check their Agni. I check how much toxin they have in their body. I see how much they exercise, how much they move their legs, which is a very big part of circulation and digestion. I see what their baseline body type is and how much purification they need. And then I see how much they used to balance their exercise and nutrition and what they're doing right now. And then I see how can I do shamana. Shamana is immunosupportive, just palliation of their symptoms. And then I help build themselves up with rasayana. And these are all different small things that I've given people to do through the coronavirus situation so that they can increase their immune system without specific medicines. I also give some specific medicines to the person, but those depend on the person. And I dedicate this session to my mom, who passed away a few months ago. She taught me the ancient wisdom of health and how to stay well. And most of these rituals that I've learned from her, and it's with her grace and with her blessings that I've been able to practice good living and good health of Ayurveda around the world. We've lived in Germany and the UK and all over the US, as well as in Kolkata and now in Benares. And I am so privileged that my mom had the wisdom not to become so modern that she just blindly adopted Western things, but rather she said, no, this is our culture. This is Bharat, not India, Bharat. And Bharat has certain wisdom that has allowed it to avoid the plague, encephalitis, smallpox, and a variety of diseases, and to keep people well. And so this is what I'm going to give to my children. And I'm very blessed to have that knowledge from her. Thank you for listening to me. I hope that this has been interesting for you, and I look forward to hearing your questions. Namaste.
Thank you very much. Namaste, Dr. Bhattacharya, and thank you for sharing all the wisdom that you did today. And let's welcome questions from the participants. I'm sure there must be tons of questions. You touched upon so many interesting, exciting things. So let's see if there are any questions first. You can also type your questions in the chat window if you want. Maybe to kick off, can I go ahead with the question, please, with your all permission?
Nice.
Okay, please, yeah, Dr. Meera Chakrabarti, any question? Yes, Dr. Meera.
Just
Yeah,
have to have a rejoinder that since I think these are fine, the descriptions that Bhaswati has given, but since it's also psychosomatic, are you able to hear me?
Yes. Please go ahead.
Okay,
yeah.
Since it is psychosomatic and it is also spiritual in a sense, there is this mention in the Charaka Sutra that Atmendriya Manorthanam Sannikarshat Pravartate Vyaktaha. That these three, body, mind, and soul, are to be treated together. So, therefore, when you mention that in pandemic, what happens in times of chaos, the spiritual aspect is totally forgotten because that is the space of uncertainty. Pandemic is the space of uncertainty. But if we can rest there, then perhaps then we can find out how through this mundane world you can seek a spiritual kind of a perspective. Now in Sankhya Darshana, there is this mention of three gunas, the sattva, rajas, and tamas. Okay, and they are entangled in a way. I find in your in one of your mention at the quantum physics. Now in quantum entanglement also, there's an entanglement, and if one can come out of that entanglement, and in entanglement there are more elements which are naturally combined. So the maladies can be really treated if we can try to solve these entanglement. Now, these Vata, Pitta, Kapha also have a fundamental background of this Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. Sattvika, Rajasika, Tamasika, these the characteristics are there. And the permutation and combination of these are very, very important because and very varied, therefore also varied, which is needed. So beyond just the logistics of how this is applied, if we can also see these perspectives, which is given by they are not actually Shastra, but they are schools of thought, philosophy. Since you mentioned Indian wisdom, so I'm mentioning Indian wisdom as a student of philosophy and Sanskrit and cultural studies. That this helps us to understand this entanglement, which is, as Dr. Jain mentions, in modern science, how we can really relate. We can really relate it to the quantum entanglement and try to see what really happens. Thank you. This is just thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Professor Jain.
Okay. I thought you were going to respond to. Yeah, please. You want to respond
No, I
to?
can. She didn't ask any questions, right? And I can't see her, so I don't know exactly.
Okay, fine.
What.
We'll go to another question then.
Yeah, sure. Actually, I have. I really appreciate the presentation. It was highly insightful.
Yes.
Now, I have one curiosity about you mentioned about the Raga Chikitsa. So, what are the sources? What is the Ayurveda text that deals with the Raga Chikitsa as well as the impact of sound on the body and its correlationship. So I'm curious because the concept of raga is comes maybe quite later on. The Charak Samhita and the text is quite old when the raga concept was not there. So it seems the raga chikitsa is a terminology which comes into existence maybe after the 4th century AD. But Charaka Samhita and other sutras or other treatises are quite ancient. So I'm curious to know about the source of Raga Chikitsa in Ayurvedic text.
So I was trying to respond to Dr. Mira's comments first, but I think,
Okay, sure.
No, it's okay. He didn't say I should, and then he didn't allow me. So it's okay. I'll just skip over that. In terms of Raga Chikitsa,
Yes, Raga Chikitsa.
one of the important things to remember is that all of the ancient Indian sciences interface with each other. It's not that one is a particular work of this period only and it's done, and then this comes later, so this didn't exist at Dr. Vinod, can you hear me? Hello?
No. Yeah.
Intermittently.
Am I audible?
Yes, now, yes.
Yeah, now yes.
Okay, sorry about that. So it's not that these different texts existed at this time and didn't exist at any other time. I think that's a fallacy of the Western way of thinking, that texts are dated at a certain time. The texts are found and dated as per the scholar. However, the knowledge was always there. And by the way, it's not AD, it's CE, and it's been that way for about 40 years. And it's just bizarre to me that Indians say AD and BC anymore. So if you look in the Common Era and you see what texts were found, that is just when the texts were found. The knowledge came from the Vedas a long time before. If you look in the Vedas and the way that the shlokas were spoken, the different chandas by which they were spoken, the matra of each shloka, the padas, you will find that there was a certain sound being conveyed. And certainly in the Rig Veda, you have a mandala being created by the sound through the 10 different, what you can say are the different chapters, or the elevation, the latitudes of them. So from then itself, the Gandharva Veda started, and Ayurveda has, I can look into exactly where I've seen the Charaka describe the importance of the sound therapy. They don't call it sound therapy as such. They just talk about the vibrations of the mantra being important. Now, the way to learn it is to go through Guru Shishya Parampara. So my parampara comes from the 12th century, and my guru received it from his guru, and we teach it down the line. And if there are texts that discuss them, fine. But we don't need to discuss them with a particular time and date to define them. So for example, Dr. Chakravarti talked about Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. Sattva is rarely there in human beings. It's there for just moments of time, and it's there in the rishis, who are very, very few. 99.99% of people don't live in Sattva. They live in Rajas and Tamas, and that's the way their life is. They're fleeting moments of Sattva throughout the day if they are successful meditators. That Shastra comes from Yoga Shastra. Those are Shastras as much as any of the other 6 fundamental, we can say, they call them the Shad Darshan, the different philosophies that underlie Ayurveda, and Ayurveda fully utilizes those. So Raga Shastra, Mantra Shastra, even Vriksha Ayurveda, the idea of the knowledge of the trees, which we in modern day call botany, Vriksha Ayurveda, which comes out of a text called Rasa Vaisheshika. So that is part of the Shastras. Ayurveda takes anything and everything related to living and embeds it into a whole series of books. This modern Ayurvedic experts have classified it into the Dietary, which are the Shushruta Samhita, Charaka Samhita, and the 2 books of Vagbhata, the Ashtanga Hridayam and the Ashtanga Sangraha. And then the 3 minor books of Lagutray, which are more about Madhav Nidan, which is about diagnosis, and Sharangdar Samhita, which is about how to make different kalpanas or different types of medicines, and the Bhava Prakash, which is also about recipes. So it's not that these only existed from the 12th century. They existed much longer. And so if you want to learn Raga Chikitsa, I have compiled a page from about 6 or 7 of my ancient wise scholars. One of my uncles is actually one of the disciples of Alayuddin Khan Sahib. And so he had taught me some things. I've put them onto one of the pages at dinacharya.org. You can see it. It's called Raga Chikitsa. And it talks about medical conditions and the ragas that are used for them. The man that I'm working with, the Vaidya, who's in Udupi, where I'm working clinically, he uses Raga Chikitsa for the patients, especially cancer patients and people with mental illness. And we get amazing results. That knowledge comes, as I said, through parampara. So that's what I would say for source. If you want to find actual shlokas, yes, I can help you find them. But usually it's the elder musicians who can tell you much more personally and in live time. And I don't agree that psychosomatic is just something of the mind. I believe in the inner pharmacist, and that each of the chemicals that we produce come from taking in things through our senses. So it's not just mind, body, and soul. It's mind, body, senses, and soul. And Ayurveda is very clear that there are 4 elements. It comes into the body, and then it can be sound like raga. It can be light. It can be so many different things we eat or drink. And then the brain processes different chemicals, including hormones and enzymes, to help our body to digest it. So raga is just one form of treatment. So it's a really nice question. And I hope that you can use it medicinally and see how it works, and then explore more, Dr. Vinod. Thank you for your question.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. I guess we'll go to the next question.
Yeah.
Did you want to make a counter comment, Dr. Vinod?
No counter comment. See, I asked this question out of curiosity, because nowadays people are talking about raga, and they have classified ragas for particular diseases, set of diseases, and there are many claims. And of course these claims are also challenged. But when actually, now let me introduce myself. Actually, I belong to the Rigveda tradition. Secondly, I have done quite I'm a quite avid reader of Natya Shastra of Bharata, as well as Sharangdeva's treatises. So I have also worked on Shrutis, the microtones, 22 Shrutis. I have designed an instrument called Samashruti Veena. I call it Bharata Veena. But apart from that, so I didn't come across any source in these treatises. Even the Naradi Shiksha, for example, these are the highly respected sources in Indian music. Now there is not a single shloka or sutra which deals with the therapy of say swaras, therapeutic use of swaras. So out of my curiosity, I thought that if there is some reference in Ayurveda text which talks about ragas and talks about swaras, and so I'm curious about the original shlokas from the Ayurvedic treatises, because as far as the musicology or the Sangita Shastra treatises are concerned, I didn't find the reference. So it was out of my curiosity.
Yeah, and so what the teachers will tell you, the real teachers, is how do you know that the book that you have, the Sangita Shastra or the, what's the other one you mentioned?
See, Naradi Shiksha, then Bharata's Natya Shastra, specifically the 20th chapter of Natya Shastra, and Sangit Ratnakar by Sharangdeva. These are the treatises which are highly respected, and they actually, for example, Natya Shastra is also considered as Gandharva Veda, for instance, because there is no Gandharva Veda, original Gandharva Veda text available currently. But the Natya Shastra is considered as Gandharva Veda. But there is no reference of therapeutic use of swaras and ragas, for example.
So what I have learned is that those shlokas are there. However, they're encrypted, and you have to take the shlokas and read them. You know what I'm saying? You have to read them backwards, some of them, and that's not been done by many people. Some of the Sanskrit shlokas are written like this, like the Nag, and so you have to read them in the ulta way.
Yes. Actually, yes. I'm quite aware about the sutra system, and so I myself have also actually I belong to the tradition of Sanskrit scholars. My father has actually by-hearted the Panini's Ashtadhyayi, so I carry that kind of tradition. So with all this, actually, when I read, I go into the original Sanskrit text. I never read the commentaries. I go to the original text and I go to the original
and they are
commentaries.
encrypted.
Yeah. Sorry?
Yeah, they're encrypted. They are encrypted. They are encrypted.
Yes. So I actually, I have.
That you have to decipher.
I am aware about the cryptic, how it is encrypted. Yes.
So since you're a Rig Veda person, you know that if you do the chandas and it doesn't match, you know that there's a shloka missing. If you do the particular following of each of them and you watch them and they don't stack on top of each other properly as you chant them, you know that there's a shloka missing. And that is how you can check the authenticity of that.
Yes. Actually, these are called pathas. There are Jata Patha, Ratha Patha. So I'm quite deeply into it. So I'm not actually asking question, or my curiosity is not at that level. My curiosity is at very at level where even with all this, I didn't find any original source. Which talks about the
answer that.
Therapeutic
let me just
use
answer
of
that
swaras.
for a moment.
Yeah, sure.
Let me just answer that for a moment. So what I'm looking forward to is for Professor Jain and your entire group to build a party to go to the British Library, to go to several libraries in the USA and in Austria. There are a few countries where they're holding the original texts and will not let people access them unless they want to let them. So to be able to access those stolen texts, some of which are in British National Library, some are at the Wellcome Trust, some are in Oxford and Cambridge, some are at the University of Graz in Austria. We know where they are. We cannot get access to them, and we're pretty sure that they are there. For example, one of my very quiet wise men knows where to find a complete copy of the Sushruta Samhita, which no one can find in India. And he knows exactly where it is. The question is, how do we get access to those shlokas? We know that the full book of Raga Chikitsa is somewhere in Europe. And if you and I talk more, I can give you some leads. But one of the realities we know is that the stuff that was very useful was taken out for a variety of reasons. One was because of all the invasions, and one was because they were just people that are not nice people. They believe in destruction. I mean, you've seen some of the destructive, tendencies. So I just want to say to you that those therapeutic shlokas are there. Some of them are now kept alive in oral tradition. But if you're very, very interested in them, I can talk to you more about people that you can talk with. I'm sure you know many of the people in India that are working on this, but I think it's very sad that someone who knows about the therapeutic side is not sharing it with those people who are on the more scholarly side.
No, but what I would like to say, Dr. Vinod Viswanji,
yes,
if you also contact National Library, Calcutta, Plus, there are copies of the manuscripts which are with the individual scholars, pandits. In both in Kerala and in Bengal, you will find them. That is one thing. The other thing is this: you have to go. I think there is for this Raga Chikitsa, the fundamental is the Nada Brahma concept. The concept. Now, let me also introduce myself. I was Sanskrit department chair in Bangalore University earlier. Now I'm in the Jain University Cultural Studies department. I'm a research faculty there. And I was I was a member of the State Commission for Women because I'm in the social justice movement. So this is a very short introduction. Okay, fine. So if you go to the Bhartrihari's concept of Nada Brahma, then you get how the vibrations synchronize to uplift the consciousness level of the consciousness. And from there, the derivation, this is the secondary derivation of Raga. Chikitsa comes in the secondary derivation. But the concept of the Nada Brahma, which is also in the Upanishad, as well as, Bhartrihari has done a very good job, very nice job to in details how the concept of Nada and in threadbare details, how it is, really related to the process of uplifting the consciousness. Even in a much rather material sense, when we hear music, we are our mood is uplifted. If you're sad or if you're disappointed. So this is much mundane example, but the concept is discussed very well. The philosophy and the tattva is discussed very well. And also the tantric texts, if you go to the text of Tantra, then also you find this concept of Nada and the concept of it. So this is just a rejoinder that I feel, yeah.
Thank you. I think we'll go to the next question, please.
So
Yeah.
where you
next question is from another flame professor, Professor Suniti Vadalkar, and she has asked the question, how does consuming water from copper vessels help? For Dr. Bhattacharya, please.
So copper has an antimicrobial property. We already know that. It prevents not only bacteria from growing, but it kills viruses. And we know that copper has very strong potency to the liver. But before it gets into the body, when it's just in the vessel, copper is a superior antimicrobial. So it just prevents things from growing in it. And that's why the cisterns that were kept under houses in Rajasthan, in the desert, where they'd have 1 or 2 inches of water a year, those were made of pure copper, or at least lined with pure copper, so that the water would only contact that. If you want to know the specifics of antimicrobial, cell wall dismutases and things, I can get that for you. But is that what you're generally asking, or do you have a more specific question on that, Professor?
Professor Suniti Vadalkar was asking this question. I'm not sure if she's still here. Yeah. All right. We'll go to the next question then. From Ria Davda, how can one determine their Vata, Pitta, and Kapha?
You can do a dosha quiz. There are a lot of them online. There's some very long ones who will definitely depress you and make you very sad because they're like 85 pages long. But you can take shorter quizzes. There are many available. If you can't find one, you can write to me. I give my students and patients these quizzes to find out your basics. The thing you have to know taking the quiz is where you are now. And so you answer the questions of how is your hair now, how is your skin now, how is your everything now. And then with a different color of pen, take the same quiz and think back to the time when you were in your optimal state of health. It might have been when you were an Olympic athlete. It might have been just after you had your first baby. It might have been after a certain surgery you had. It could be at any point in your adult life. And by adult, let's say age 17 or so. Anything after that, take your optimal best of health time and answer the questions according to that. And between the two of them, Usually the one where you are right now is not your optimal health, that's your vikriti. And generally physicians get patients who are not well, that's why they come to the doctor. So that's you now. And then this is your optimal state of health. If you do this, then generally you can figure it out. In addition, the gold standard is someone taking your test. So if you, someone takes, I'm actually doing it backwards. If I take it this way, then you can see that I've got my fingers on the pulse and I can detect what your actual Vata Pitta Kapha is. And based on that, there have been lots of studies that show that these quizzes are validatable by the gold standard of the pulse. And that's how you generally figure out what your prakriti is. So your prakriti is your baseline constitutional dosha, which doesn't change in your life. And then you've got your vikriti, which obviously is your unwellness, and that shifts from age to age, and it can shift month to month depending on how well you take care of your health. So that is how you figure out your Vata Pitta Kapha percentages in your own body.
Very good. Thank
you
you very much. The next question is from Rajiv Agarwal. Vasudiji, you have done I'm just reading his question. Vasudiji, you have done a super work in writing Everyday Ayurveda and introducing the subject to people. My question is where to get fluoride-free toothpaste?
Okay, that's a great question. So in India, most of the Indian toothpastes are like Dant Manjan, and Dant Manjan I think is made both by Divya, Patanjali, and there's a few local brands that make them. You can find fluoride-free toothpaste by going to any Ayurveda store and just asking the guy. Now, the issue with toothpaste is that it's easier for those of us who have been trained in the West to just take a tube and just put a little bit out on the toothbrush and then brush with it. The best thing to do is to use tooth powder because it doesn't have any of that sodium dodecyl sulfate or sodium lauryl sulfate. It's a chemical that creates the foaminess, which also is bad for your gingiva, which is that lining between your teeth and your gum, that line. It's very bad for it, and it actually promotes cancer in people, and it's been outlawed in many countries in Europe. But because the foaming aspect is so important for the psychology of the modern user to think that's working, the foam makes them think it's working. It's a whole scam around marketing. But in order to avoid that foaming, you just use salts. So you can take ground powder of spices along with a little bit of salt or baking soda and make it into a powder, keep it in a little jar and use a little bit of that day to day. So what I do in the mornings, I just pour out some of that, put my toothbrush into it, wet the toothbrush first, put it into it, and then just brush that way. That is a superior way of brushing your teeth. But it is not common for people today because they're so used to the convenience of toothpaste. They don't want to take that extra bit to get the powder and wet the toothbrush. For some reason, people don't want that. And it doesn't give them that minty flavor. It doesn't give them all the stuff that they are used to having. So I'll invite you to start using tooth powder since you're interested in this. And thank you for saying good things about the book. It's also important that you look into the book since you have it and look at the 3 different Vata Pitta Kapha seasons of the year and use the toothpaste according to it. So for example, right now in the north, we're just coming into summer, right? We just had Ratha Saptami a few days ago. So now summer is starting, but let's say December and January where there's a lot of kapha, you want to have things that cut kapha. So you would use more of the muleti, which is also known as yashti madhu or joshti madhu. You would use khadira, and you would use other getting cut off. You would use very bitter and astringent herbs that cut through the phlegm of the kapha season. And if you do that, you will find that you don't have that post-nasal. People have this cup that's stuck in the back between their nose and their mouth, that phlegm. So it'll get rid of that. As we move into the hot season, it's pitta season. So you want to use things that are cooling and are more sweet. So you can put a little bit of cinnamon in there. Don't use cassia, which is Chinese cinnamon, use a Sri Lankan cinnamon. Use some fennel, which we also call sauf or mori, and use a little bit of misri, which is called rock sugar, the stuff that has crystallized around a rock sugar. Chemical structure is not crystal sugar, it's, you know, it's those big cubes of sugar. So if you use that, that's a real toothpaste. Thank you for the professor.
Thank you very much for that great, all the great answers, all the great insights. I wish we had better connection. I really can go on, at least me personally can go on listening to your insights on and on forever. Would love to invite you again if you are available and willing, depending on your time. Anything else from anybody else, Dr. Vidwans or anybody else? If not, then
I
I
would
think
like to listen. Actually, I would like to listen more on the next lecture if you'll invite me to listen
sure.
to Dr. Chakravarti and Dr. Vidwans, because I love
sure.
the depth of their questions, and I love how they bring out some of the interfaces of Ayurveda without knowing the kind of the application part, which is what I specialize in. They talk about the scholarly sources, which I'm also very interested in. Having done my Fulbright on Ojas, I was looking, yes, at the practical medical application and interface of immunity and immunology. But when you look in the Shastras, there are such deep, what can I say, such deep knowledge that's interdisciplinary, right? The Vahara Mihira Samhita, the texts that go from, you know, one discipline all the way across and show the depth of cohesive understanding of different sciences. They weren't all relegated to different departments and different parts of the scenario of intellectual ability. They were all completely seamless. And I love how Dr. Chakravarti moved between Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, and then talked about, you know, the application of Ayurveda and how she called it psychosomatic, which has a very negative connotation, but the power of the inner chemist to pharmacologically produce the chemicals you need and take them to your thyroid and take them to your, you know, your liver and then over to your pancreas. That whole ability that she kind of inferred is so alive in people who practice Ayurveda. So I would love to listen to them and
sure, yes,
you know,
we'll invite you. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
and,
to the well. Thank you for the questions.
Thank you for all the questions. Thank you for your lecture, and we'll connect more as the time permits from you and from all. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. Thank you.